For assignment 3, I decided to do my presentation on chapter 12 from Gass and Sater, and it just deals with deception and detection. So we'll just jump right into it. So some research shows that the average person can detect a liar with about the same accuracy as someone flipping a coin. So, as I said in the slides, about a 50-50 shot of detecting a liar when looking at truth and lies together. However, when you look at them separately, people's detection accuracy is above 50% for truth, but well below 50% for lies. This concept is called the veracity effect. This is termed by Levine and his colleagues Park and McCornack in 1999. So it may not seem that important in terms of light lies. However, detecting deception in professional scenarios, such as journalists, law officers, custom inspectors, jurists, negotiators, job interviewers, Secret Service agents, and consumers, it does shine quite a big light. This makes it quite important as it gives some practical advantages as to why we should improve our detecting skills. So now, a question that was brought up in the text is how deception relates to persuasion, because it is in a persuasion textbook. And well, deception is part of persuasion. If you think of it this way, in a case of persuasion, an intentional decision is made to try and get an individual to believe what the liar knows to be inaccurate. I found this quote from chapter 12. It was written in 1993 by Miller and Stiff. I chose it just because I believe it encapsulated a big concept into just a few words. And it states, deceptive communication strives for persuasive ends, or stated more precisely, deceptive communication is a general persuasive strategy that aims at influencing the beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors of others by means of deliberate message distortion. So just pause the video here and ask yourself what your motivation for lying is, if you were to have one. Do you have an answer? Here's some reasons found in chapter 12 that researchers have come up with as to why people lie. Firstly, they lie to affiliate. They lie to avoid invasion of privacy, lie to avoid conflict, lie to appear better, lie to protect yourself, lie to benefit yourself, lie to harm another, or lie to benefit another. Were any of these similar to your choices? And so when it comes to deception, Burgoon, Buller, Ebersou, and Rockwell stated 3 main deception strategies, namely distortion, omissions, and falsifications. Although other researchers have come up with other ways to categorize deception, it is stated in chapter 12 that a final way of conceptualizing deception was proposed as a theory in information manipulation theory in 2014. So this is a little bit more recent than those previous deception strategies. However, the theory discussed that when we are conversing with others, we think it is safe to assume that they will give us truthful information that is relevant, clear, and informative. However, sadly, they may manipulate the information by the quantity, so telling the truth but not the whole truth, or they might change the quality of the information when nothing they say is true. Thirdly, they might manipulate the information through manner violations, and lastly, they could manipulate it in relation violations. I know this is quite a lot of information, but I've broken it down into quite simplest stats from the textbook. And if only it were so easy to see the lies like Pinocchio's nose. So there's only theoretical ideas and tactics that we can decipher to decide who is lying or who is telling the truth. And to do this, they've come up with a few different methods. One of the methods is named as the four-factor model. It was created, or rather proposed, by Zuckerman and Driver in 1985. In the four-factor method, the model tries to explain why people behave differently when lying, rather than just listing what people do when lying. So these four factors are arousal, attempted control, felt emotions, and cognitive effort. So assumptions are made just for this to be relevant. So firstly, we are assuming that people are more aroused or anxious when lying. We're assuming that people do not want to get caught telling lies. The four-factor model argues that they try to control their behaviors. This seems to be the case both before and during deception. It assumes that due to growing up in a society where lying is negative, it is assumed that when compared to truthful individuals, deceivers displayed less facial pleasantness, with the use of more negative statements. And lastly, lying requires you to think a lot harder than telling the truth does. Why? Well, as stated in chapter 12, it's fairly easy to tell a story about something you've already heard or experienced. When you lie, however, you oftentimes are required to make things up as you go along. And when you make things up, you're then required to remember what you make up in order to not contradict yourself and your own story and then get caught up in the lie. So that's the four-factor model. Another model is named the interpersonal deception theory, which is a little bit more recent and was proposed in 2004 by Burgoon and Buller. It is said in this theory that liars might do the following. Firstly, manipulate information. By manipulating information in their messages to dissociate themselves from the message. Secondly, to strategically control their behavior to suppress deception cues. And thirdly, manage their image by smiling or nodding their head to make themselves appear more credible. And those are the two models which are used to explain why people behave differently when lying. Moving on. So what makes a liar persuasive? That was a big question in chapter 12 that stood out to me quite a bit. And according to what I read in the text, having an honest demeanor is seen as being truthful, even when that individual is lying. A person's social skills can influence how successful he or she is at deceiving others. And according to the results of two meta-analyses, they found that males tend to be more successful at lying than females. Who thought gender would have such an impact? And now that we have discussed from the perspective of the liar, we have a little bit of a change of perspectives and are now looking through things as the person who is being lied to, the detector. Firstly, we should ask ourselves if there are actually factors affecting detectors' liars' truth bias. So firstly is truth biases, the assumption that people are honest. However, this can impede judgment and is therefore ruled out. Eye contact is stereotypically heard to be a telltale sign of lying. Well, the lack of eye contact, that is. However, that was debunked by research which shows that liars do not in fact avoid eye contact, ruling out eye contact too. Training someone to be better at spotting lies is quite tricky and is said to backfire more often than not, thus ruling training out too. Familiarity and biases. So this brought up the question if knowing someone helps us detect their deception better. However, the results were inconclusive. There is a theory that argues that familiarity is a double-edged sword. In some ways, it may help you to be a better deception detector, although in other ways, it might hinder your ability to detect deception. So it is not completely ruled out, however, it is inconsistent. Suspicion. So there appears to be a weak relationship between suspicion and the ability to discriminate lies from truth, and more of a weaker relationship than strong. So thus, we rule out suspicion too, as one of the good factors of affecting detecting liars. Lastly is eliciting clues to deception. Here there are two approaches to this step. Firstly is the imposing cognitive load approach, and based on the assumption that lying is mentally taxing and will be more mentally taxing than telling the truth, an increase in cognitive demands will occur. Liars, who have fewer cognitive resources, will struggle more than truth tellers, thus making it valid. The second approach is strategic questioning, and it essentially is just as it sounds. It's asking questions to get certain answers. Just like when someone is being interrogated, police officers or the person asking questions will use several questions that were strategically designed to gain useful information about the scenario. And whether they were lying or telling the truth, they tend to slip up. And here we can see, after ruling out truth bias, eye contact, training, and suspicion, there aren't many factors affecting detecting liars, so it leaves us quite stumped. However, eliciting cues to deception in both approaches of the imposing cognitive load approach and the strategic questioning approach, and somewhat of familiarity and biases, are the main effective tools to use in detecting liars, so that's something to always keep in mind. And just to conclude Chapter 12 of Gass and Sater, deception is a complex communication aspect. It has been broadly studied, and in this chapter we explored some of these ideas. We also learned that although people are not very good at detecting deception, some factors improve their accuracy. We also took some time and examined some of the behaviors that distinguish truthful from deceptive individuals, and some of the methods that explain such differences. Finally, we just discussed various approaches for eliciting cues to deception. Just a reminder, those are the imposing cognitive load approach and the strategic questioning. And that's a wrap. Thank you for attending my lecture, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you.